trusting America and Donald Trump is like trusting Dracula at a blood donation camp. I 100% stand with Israel, and India must and has to stand with Israel. Iran is no friend anymore because Americans simply commit regime change and run away from there.
Israel has never acknowledged or threatened any country with destruction.
Doctrinal antagonism towards Israel, it stems from Islam.
Professor Ranganathan, do you believe there is enough within Iran to perhaps change 30% perhaps of the population which backs the Khamenei to the hilt? Will the other 50-60%, if not more, turn up, and can there be a regime change from within, as Major Dan was saying? Or will this entire military action that forces the Khamenei to flee push a vacuum in Iran which is going to further destabilize this entire region?
A fantastic set of questions. Good evening, Anand, and good evening to my fellow panelists. I speak here as a layman because there are two experts on your panel. 3 points very briefly. Number one, in fact, I'd like to answer encompassing all the three questions that you've asked in a composite way. So first, trusting America and Donald Trump is like trusting Dracula at a blood donation camp. The fact of the matter is that everyone is on his own. In fact, as the old rogue Kissinger once said, it is dangerous to have America as an enemy, but it is fatal to have America as a friend. And, the couple of things out here, be that as it may, that's about America. When it comes to Israel, I 100% stand with Israel, and India must and has to stand with Israel for the simple reason that Israel has always stood with India. Even when in 1971 Indo-Pak war, most of the Arab nations, so-called our friends, including when Nehru said, Nasser and I share the same blood, and Indira Gandhi was so laudatory towards Sadat, Egypt stood with Pakistan. You had Iran supplying weapons to Pakistan. At that point of time, vital weaponry was provided by Israel. But we ditched Israel in the 1973 Yom War. The fact of the matter is Israel has always stood with us. Right now, Iran is antagonistic towards us. If you look at the statements of their supreme leader Khamenei, as far as Kashmir is concerned,
yes,
he's asking Muslims around the world to stand up and fight and support the freedom struggle of Muslims in Kashmir. So Iran is no friend anymore. Possibly it never was. The fact of the matter is Israel is, and out here Israel is fighting the good fight. So we have to back Israel not only because it's a friend, but also because it is a moral fight that it is fighting for all of us. Now, number two, let me return, unfortunately, to America. President Trump is absolutely right when he says that a one-party dictatorial state that suppresses its population brutally, that has brutal all-encompassing censorship, all-encompassing surveillance, that punishes dissenters with public executions in stadiums, that suppresses everything, that has industrial-scale espionage on other industries of other friendly countries, that has its neighbors, that threatens with war, should not have a nuclear bomb. He's right. Which begs the question, why is he having trade tariff negotiations with exactly such a state, China? Look at the duplicity out here. But I come to the third point, which is what you began your question with, regime change. Anand, I don't want to delve into modern history, but whenever America or anybody else has orchestrated a regime change, India and other nations have been left to pick up the pieces. I'll just mention three states. Number one, Afghanistan. Look what has happened to Afghanistan after a regime change. Look what has happened to Syria when America orchestrated a regime change. In fact, the current head of Syria had a $10 million bounty on his head, and he's shaking currently, hands with President Trump. And let's not even go to Gaddafi and Libya. There have been no elections in Libya for the last 11 years. In fact, it is almost a slow and simmering civil war that is happening out there. It is divided neatly into two factions, two tribes. So I don't know whether a regime change is a good thing or not. History tells you that it is never a good thing because Americans simply commit regime change and run away from there. And what is the benefit that India will have is something that we have to stand and decipher, because let's be very honest, we stand alone out here.
No, so does Israel. In this case, there is a doctrinal position between two nations. People would ask, I asked this question, if Israel can have nuclear weapons, why can't Iran? And Major Dan answer that question, because there are many who ask this question. You as a nation are a nuclear power. Why should you deny Iran uranium enrichment and nuclear ability? It's also signatory to NPT.
Supposedly, according to foreign sources. There's a very simple answer to that. I've been in this country for most of my life, certainly all of my adult life. I can't recall one public parade where the Israeli government and military marched in the streets parading weaponry and missiles that said death to Iran or death to any other country. You have in Iran on a regular basis a very messianic death cult that says death to America, death to Israel, weapons with which to achieve that. And so a country that regularly, even while its people suffer and have to choose between medicine or putting meat on the table, with crippling sanctions due to its illicit nuclear program, chooses to funnel some $1 billion a year into regional proxies that threaten my country. And so Israel has never acknowledged or threatened any country with destruction. It's never threatened to use these supposed nuclear weapons against anyone. And Iran, on the other hand, regularly not just threatens and calls my country a cancer that needs to be eliminated from the face of this earth. It is actively seeking those weapons, and it funds and arms and trains and operates a whole array of proxies, by the way, in a very cowardly manner. It hides behind the proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, previously the Assad regime. They strike at Israel, not just since October 7th, but especially since October 7th. And then Iran sits back and says, that's not us. We didn't do anything. We're the victim here. And so if Iran is going to play that game, we cannot allow it.
So let's say it's doctrinal for Iran and its offshoots or its progenies in terms of Hamas, Houthis, proxies, if you were to say Hamas, Houthis. For them, death to Israel, eradication of Jews was part of their doctrine. Let's say that Iran, it's doctrinal, and that's the reason why the difference between a soldier and a terrorist is that both have a gun. One wields the gun to protect, the other one to kill. So perhaps that's but what happens here? What after you've bunker busted everything? Let's say, what after you have gone ahead and destroyed and set back Iran's nuclear program by about 2 decades or 3 decades? What after that? 3 decades later, Iran is only going to come back because a wounded Iran is far more dangerous.
Israel and Israel's foreign minister Gideon Sa'ar, even just recently in the press, in an interview on Fareed Zakaria, made very clear we don't have the capacity to do regime change, certainly not in a country like Iran, which is some 20 times the size of Israel and 10 times the population. We can barely do a regime change in Gaza or in Lebanon, which were our neighbors and were much more powerful. So we need to be a little humble in this regard.
Right.
What we do need to remember and what we do need to set as our goal is that we will do everything in our power to push back the day that Iran can break out and achieve that dangerous weapon, the nuclear capacity. That is within our power, and that is why regime senior officials, the strategists, the nuclear scientists, and every aspect of the nuclear and ballistic missile program, and of course the proxy array, which we've already taken out, will be pushed back, until one day, and we hope the Iranian people will rise and retake their country, but that is not something that we can control. We can weaken the regime. We can certainly, and that's what we will do, is weaken their nuclear program and their ability to deliver such nuclear weapons.
Well, what happens in the neighborhood is not under your control, but if that neighborhood, what the neighborhood cannot do to you is something that you would like to control. So in terms of politically internal and the external dynamic. Yes, Dr. Ranganathan, 30 seconds, and General Pandey, 30 seconds. I've got to move on after this. Yes.
I'm so sorry, just extended that. I think what the previous panelist with whom I agree much could not possibly say. I'll be blunt. I think what he's talking about is the doctrinal antagonism towards Israel. It stems from Islam. So let's be very honest about it. And it's not, the problem comes is, if you're denying a Muslim nation a nuclear bomb, there is another Muslim nation that already has a nuclear bomb. And in fact, Iran let it slip in fact, one of the high-profile leaders there, that in case Iran is bombed with a nuclear weapon, Pakistan is going to bomb Israel. Of course, Pakistan denied it. But the fact is, America allowed a Muslim country to proudly display an so-called Islamic bomb. Their words, not mine. So the fact of the matter is, when it comes to doctrinal antagonism towards Jews and Israel, I'm afraid the Islamic countries already have a bomb, and it won't take long for nuclear proliferation to happen from Pakistan to Iran.
Well, with Pakistan, you don't know. They may just sell themselves to the highest bidder, as they always do, because Pakistan air bases are being perhaps somewhere used by the Americans, and that's why the soft pulling and mollycoddling that's happening. And General Munir is being hosted for a lunch there on Wednesday. General Pandey, 30 seconds, sir. We have to move on to the next story.
In 30 seconds, I'll take one very critical few seconds is that the most interesting statement came from Dr. Anand when he says that he's a layman in this panel. I think I've never heard much more absurd thing than this coming from him, because we all know his capabilities and capacities. Really honored to be here on the same panel. But very quickly, I'll just state a couple of points here that look, Israel and US may talk of anything with any other country. It can let down NATO, it can let down UK. But the symbiotic relationship with Israel and US has, it just cannot be broken, right?
Right.
The survival of Israel continues to remain contingent on the American backing. And there is a lot of mutualism. I will not get into a debate on this factor. So one is that. Second is, Iran today has lost all friends. The posturing of Khamenei, the way he has gone about, and the IRG's leadership, and what they have done in spite of talks which have happened with the Saudis. There's a time when the peace was about to come through in the region. What they have done through Hamas, Hezbollah, and in Syria has left them bereft of any friends. Russians can do nothing. They are busy in themselves. The Chinese have stepped off the grid. They can only provide some munitions, some stuff. But look at, they've got no strategic depth today to go. Syria is out of the hand. Hamas, Hezbollah gone out of the reckoning. The third H, Houthi, can only bluster talk that lakhs of people will march into Israel across this thing about 1,000 odd kilometers. They're all bluster. So when the radical elements talk, and okay, another part with unfortunate with Iran is that while it has got a massive organization, armed forces, everything, they are all meant for internal consumption, internal utilization. They are not boots on ground which can be applied to fight a war with another country, right? So that's they are also following a path of fighting a proxy war, right? Using terrorism as a state policy in form of Hamas, Hezbollah, and there are so many other elements operating in the umbrella of Iran.